Barbie is the latest film from Dynamite director Greta Gerwig. Margot Robbie stars as the titular Mattel doll, with the beginning of the film showing Barbie living in a seemingly idyllic world with all the other Barbies and Ken. However, she soon finds herself having to take a trek into the real world. Is life in plastic actually fantastic, or is playtime over for this doll?
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MontyVerse. We just saw Barbie, and boy, do we want to talk about it. Well, what a movie.
What a movie, and what a sea of pink.
You can't talk about Barbie without talking about Greta Gerwig.
Oh, God,
because in 2023, this movie comes out of the gate and feels like a director's movie. It's one of the movies of this year that I've seen so far that feels like her hand was heavily involved through every aspect of this film. And she crafts a movie with some of the most unique visuals I've seen thus far this year, and probably of the decade, to be honest with you.
No, absolutely. And I'm a fan of her. I'm very familiar with her last two films, Lady Bird and Little Women. Lady Bird is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's so interesting how she has evolved, because both of those are very character-driven comedy dramas. And you can see her fingerprints on this film with the writing and the character development, but it's also such an interesting departure in terms of the high-level concept that she explores with this. And I'm with you. This is absolutely a director's film.
It's so weird because Greta Gerwig did make the statement that she wants to start making studio films, big budget studio films, and people got immediately nervous, like, no, we can't lose another one to the studio system. Well, guess what? This is a big budget studio film about a potential franchise character. And not only does she excel in making this film, but there is no studio on earth, I feel like, that can rein her in. This movie is so wholly uniquely hers in the visuals that I don't know anyone else that could have created a movie any similar to this.
And you touched on the first thing that jumps out at me, and it jumped out to me even before the movie came out, is the visuals and the art direction. Firstly, I appreciate the fact that a lot of it was practical and not CGI. There was that news story about the paint shortage for pink paint around the world. But everything looks so gosh darn gorgeous. I love the brightness, the pastels, and they really lean into kind of the plastic, overly artificial feel of everything.
I'm so glad you brought that up right away, because that's something I'm afraid is going to get overlooked in this movie. The set design and art direction in this film is phenomenal. Honestly, I could see this winning the Oscar for
art direction
this year. Just Barbie Land itself, excluding like the rest of the movie, just the sets in Barbie Land are so wholly unique and stylistic, and I love the choices that they made, especially like just little things like the inside of Barbie's fridge, or like the shower. Like there's so many unique choices. There's a lot of geometric like shapes and choices in this film that I really appreciate too, and I really don't want that to go unsung when people talk about this movie, because it does such an amazing job of putting you in that world and letting you know what kind of movie you're in for, that I don't think it would be the same without as excellent of a job as they did.
No, absolutely. And I think that's something that, especially those sections of the film that are very strong, is without giving away anything, because this is very much a non-spoiler review.
No spoilers.
Is they really evince what it's like to be an actual doll in a way that doesn't feel overly hokey. Like the jokes land in terms of like how they function.
Yes, and a large part of that, and we'll pivot right into it, is Margot Robbie's performance. Because not only does she give an amazingly fleshed out performance that's full of range and charisma, but she also does an amazing job with the physical performance as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
Some of the things she does as Barbie, like the littlest things, like the littlest details, like how she sits or how she moves, I found myself greatly appreciating, because you could tell that so much attention to detail was put into creating this character.
And I was gonna say, and she also hits like every emotional beat she has to, because you were laughing uproariously throughout a lot of it. It is a very funny movie, and the straight-laced delivery with some of these absurd lines she has to give is great, but she also hits on some of the more somber moments as well.
I was shocked at the amount of range that she gave in this movie, because I already know that Margot Robbie is a fantastic actress, but I think the masses at large kind of have forgotten that already, because she's done a lot of stuff And outside of the like Suicide Squad films and like the bigger Hollywood films, all of the really small acting films she's did or the award films she did were kind of misses of late.
Yeah, like there was that ongoing, like, it's not even a joke as much as people just making an unnecessary dig at how a lot of her most recent films have not done well, at least financially, like Babylon, and not say that they were bad, but people just like making the joke of like, whoa, she's box office poison now.
But this movie, not only do I hope it makes more $1 billion, but I think that this film is going to remind people why Margot Robbie is cast in everything, because she's that good. And in this movie, she is that good. But you know who might even be better?
You would be remiss not to mention him.
Someone who's full of Kenergy, Ryan Gosling. The performance that Ryan Gosling gives in this movie, I don't even know how to describe it other than magnetic. My eyes are drawn to this man throughout this film.
Like, we talk about how great Margot's performance is. He truly disappears into this role. And I just didn't know that I wanted him for it so badly, because he's so sincere in every stupid thing that comes out of his mouth.
It's weird because we've seen Ryan Gosling do comedic before.
Yeah.
And he's been good at comedic before. But I feel like it's something he does so few and far between that the way he does it in this movie, it's just so wild. I think that's how I would describe the performance. A wild performance.
Yeah, because, I mean, I don't think it's, like, so outside of the realm of possibility for him to be kind of a himbo-ish character who is the generic good-looking guy who wants to get with the hot chick. But this is different from anything I've seen him in before.
Absolutely, and he goes for it, and that's something you have to applaud. Not a lot of actors, I think, would go for it in a way that he doesn't in this film, that not only makes fun of himself, but makes fun of, you know, the male gender and just toxic stereotypes of masculinity.
Yes.
And he just dives headfirst into that.
Yes, and we would also be remiss to not mention the wonderfulness of Just Ken and his performance of it.
Just a fantastic song. That song is going to be an earworm in my mind for the next like couple of weeks. He's good. What's weird is this cast is so massive. Like outside of the two main performances, which are Barbie and Ken, there's so much talent in this cast that I think it eventually becomes problematic to the film.
Yeah, and that's something we should touch on, because out of the gate, one of the concerns I know you had was you kind of felt like the movie was doing too much, and I think just the sheer volume of the cast and individual story beats and themes that they try to touch on kind of don't service it very well. Because I think they have such a strong, like, core storyline that, to be clear, everyone's great. I don't think there's anyone I actively disliked or anything. But those other things feel weaker and, like, they don't get the time that they otherwise would have deserved to have time devoted to. But also, I don't know if I would want to take time away from the main storyline either.
Yeah, I mean, the core of this film is feminism and patriarchy. And when I say that, I don't mean that like in a triggering or offensive way to people, because we know those are hot button words. You know, people get PO'd whenever they hear them. But I say that because this film like exists around those core concepts.
Yeah.
They're so ingrained into the film itself that you can't have this film without exploring those concepts. And they do that extremely well. I think that's what works really well in this film. That storyline, those themes work really well. But the problem is they also want to tackle a bunch of other different themes and a bunch of other really big, deep, very complex themes.
Yeah, and ones that I think are very naturally seem inclined to be related to Barbie, and a lot of them and they're good, they just have no room to breathe, I think, without making the movie an extra hour.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the complexities of existentialism and our place in the universe.
Yeah, there's capitalism. Yeah, Barbie is a product.
There's obviously like the toxic effect of Barbie on
like body image, and identity and self-worth.
And it feels like they touch on all of these things, and the scenes where they touch on them are good, but it feels kind of a little all over the place and disjointed.
It's all over the place, and I don't think I feel like they do a good job of tying up ends. It just was not as effective as it otherwise maybe could have been.
Yeah, it's not as tight as I would have wanted it to be, and it feels like Greta Gerwig and her husband Noah Baumbach, who you reminded me co-wrote this film. It feels like they took the existing Barbie script that was around when Amy Schumer was attached, and they kind of cherry pick some things out of it and added it to their own.
Right.
Which feel out of place in their movie, and it sticks out kind of like a sore thumb.
Yeah, and like speaking of things really quickly out of place is I think this movie nails the tone very well a lot of the time in terms of parody, satire, but then having the more somber moments that really flesh out the characters. There are some times where I do think it's a bit tonally inconsistent though, because you have a bit of the ridiculousness of the Barbie land and having these literal toys. And then you get into the real world and there's some stuff that seems almost more cartoonish there.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird choice. It's a weird directorial choice.
Yeah.
That it's not even the whole real world. It's like they make it clear that they want to tell the story of Barbie Land and the real world, which is supposed to be a very realistic portrayal of our world. But then we go to Mattel and it's like the Acme factory and Looney Tunes in there. Everyone's like flopping around like fish.
Right.
And jumping all over the place. And it's really cartoonish, even more cartoonish than Barbie Land, especially at the end of the movie.
Right. And like there's a whole chase sequence, which not that it's not fun, it's just a bit of a weird choice.
I mean, it didn't take me out of the movie, but it's a little, like you said, it's tonally inconsistent to, I think, what they were trying to do in that specific moment.
Right. And then like my last real thing with this movie, which to be clear, I think is very much above the sum of its parts. When you think too much about it, there are certain things with this world building that I think fall apart a little bit but ultimately we don't need it. We don't need everything to be answered to enjoy it.
That, and you know me, I'm a nitpicker. Like I love picking apart like inconsistencies in the world building and not explaining the rules of your world well enough. This movie doesn't do a great job of that, but at the same time, I didn't care at all. I was completely engrossed in the movie. And I think that, again, we have to credit Greta Gerwig's direction as well as writing, because I was just so entrenched in this film and wanting to see where the characters go next and what the dialogue is. Because we talked about the script in things we don't like, but the script is so good. The dialogue is fantastic. Yeah. The jokes all worked for me. There's some really smart, witty dialogue in here that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, and like even, especially going, again, credit to the actors, some of the physical humor is great.
Absolutely.
Like even just like the face acting for some of the other Barbies and Kens, they just add to the humor of it so well. There's like all these very subtle references to things that they make to, I mean, we've seen the trailers. There's a whole dance sequence and a fight sequence.
And I will say this, there's too many Barbies and Kens in this movie to name them all. And they all do a great job. But like Nicki said, they do a great job with not giving much to do, because the meat of the dialogue is obviously Ryan Gosling's and Margot Robbie's.
Yeah, by far.
But they all craft their own unique characters just in physical presence and just the stuff they're doing in the background of scenes. Like, I have to give a shout out to Kingsley Ben-Adir, because we just watched Secret Invasion episode 5 this morning, and he was he felt so larger than life and big in that episode as Gravik. And then to see how he acts in this movie, it's like a complete 180. And he's so talented, and I loved him in One Night in Miami. And it's just, man, everyone is firing on that cylinder in this movie, and that's another thing that makes it so enjoyable, because it's like everyone is committed to making this movie. And when you see the movie that they made, you can understand why all of these actors and everyone put all of their heart and soul into this film, because it just works for me. No,
absolutely. And for me, it's easily one of the top movies of the year. The expectations were very high for it, and I think, honestly, it definitely, I would say, probably exceeded them for me.
Well, Nicki, speaking of that then, on a scale of 1 to 5 Barbie convertibles? Barbie cars?
Ooh, Corvettes?
Barbie, because I don't want to split a Barbie doll in half if we give a half rating.
Oh, no.
So Barbie dream cars, what would you rate Barbie?
This is so tough, because I can't ignore the issues I have with it entirely. I don't think it's a perfect film, but I had such a blast with it. So I'm going to give it a very rousing, enthusiastic recommendation with a 4 out of 5 dream cars.
That's fair. I can understand why you went that route, and talking to you after the movie, I definitely can relate to your nitpicks with the film. That being said, for me, I think the movie is whip smart, and I think it's smart enough to address its inconsistencies and flaws in the film itself, so it doesn't bother me nearly as much as I know it bothered you coming out of it. So for me personally, this is a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I love this movie way more than I thought I was going to, and I thought I was going to love it. Like, I laughed so hard. Tears were rolling down my eyes in this movie. It's a great film to go see. If you liked the trailer for this movie, you will no doubt like this movie. So everyone should go check out Barbie this weekend. It's a big recommendation from us. Go check it out. If you guys like this video, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell. If you want to check out more of our movie reviews or TV reviews, click the link on the page. Until next time, guys, stay versed.